Hello, this is Professor Patrick Martin of the Department of Economics and Finance here at the University of Guelph. Today we're going to talk about fiscal policy, which is a complement to monetary policy, which we discussed in an earlier video tutorial. Fiscal policy is conducted by the Government of Canada and refers to actions taken with respect to government spending or taxation that affect aggregate demand. Just like with monetary policy, the objectives of fiscal policy can be thought of as being threefold. And they are, once again, economic growth, low unemployment, and price stability or low inflation. You might recall that the government using monetary policy would affect changes in the money supply, which resulted in changes in interest rates. And those changes in interest rates affected investment spending, consumption spending, and net exports. With fiscal policy, we're primarily concerned with changes to aggregate expenditure that result from changes in government spending itself, okay, as well as tax changes that affect the level of disposable income that households have, and by changing the amount of income that consumers have to spend, that's going to change consumption spending, of course. So fiscal policy works through changes in government spending and changes in consumption spending that result from changes in disposable income. There's another effect to fiscal policy as well, which we won't really talk about that much in our video tutorial, but you will read about it in your textbook and in the instructor commentary online. And that is that government spending, to the extent that borrowing needs to take place, will reduce the available of funds that firms have to make investment spending. And so there might be an interest rate effect that results from increased government spending or from reduced government spending that actually affects some of those other spending components, and most notably investment spending. We call that effect crowding out, where government spending through increases in interest rates crowds out private investment. But we're not going to really speak to that anymore during this tutorial. So the policy tools that the government has, we've already talked about both of them, are one, government spending. I'm just going to kind of abbreviate that. You might recall we used the capital letter G in the models that we developed earlier to refer to government spending. And also taxation. And taxes can be of two types. One type is fixed taxation that does not depend upon income, and we refer to that in the textbook and instructor notes by using a capital T. These are taxes that do not depend upon income. But as well, we discussed in the textbook and the instructor commentary, we'll discuss during these video tutorials as well, taxes that do depend upon income. And we're going to introduce a marginal tax rate, and we're going to refer to that marginal tax rate using a lowercase t. So this is going to be a value between 0 and 1 that when multiplied by income in the economy gives us the amount of taxes that are paid by consumers and are used to finance government spending. Okay, so let's talk about when fiscal policy is used. And just like with monetary policy, the economy will typically find itself in one of several places. Either output is below its potential level, in which case we are typically in a recession and we have high unemployment, we have little pressure on prices. In fact, there's downward pressure on prices. And as well, we have low economic growth typically, and when we have output below its potential level. And in that case, the appropriate fiscal policy would be expansionary fiscal policy. So let's just write down those two words. Well, there's one word, expansionary fiscal policy. And this happens when output, I'm just going to use Y to refer to real GDP, is less than potential output in the economy, okay? And here we're possibly in a recession. The appropriate response by government is to try to stimulate the economy. And one way to do that is to use government spending, increase government spending, or to reduce taxes in the economy. And that will stimulate the economy. We'll talk about how that happens in a moment. The other type of fiscal policy is contractionary fiscal policy. And you might recall that when we were speaking about monetary policy, we also talked about expansionary and contractionary monetary policy. And the situations that call for either type of policy were identical to those when we talked about monetary policy, right? These are monetary policy and fiscal policy are just two different ways for the government to try to respond to output levels that are less than normal or output levels that are higher than normal. And here, contractionary policy would be used if output was greater than its potential level, in which case you'd have an overheated economy, and the government would take some action to try to reduce inflationary pressures in the economy. We're going to take a brief break here, and we're going to come back and we're going to use some diagrams, use the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model to talk about the conduct of fiscal policy. So we'll see you back in just a moment.